Hi, and welcome back to Your Mileage May Vary, an introduction to Formula One racing. Today we're going to be talking about circuits and the calendar for 2024. And I do want to preface this video by saying I will be discussing some sad topics, so I'll just let you know ahead of time. The 2024 season has 24 Grand Prix across 5 of 7 continents, starting in March and ending in December, 6 in the Americas, 4 in Western Asia, which is the Middle East, 9 in Europe, and then 4 in Eastern Asia and Pacific Asia. And before we get into the where, we're going to talk about a few vocabulary things to know. First is the term circuit. Circuit in Formula One is another term for the racetrack. A lot of tracks raced at have a variation of the word circuit in their names. And then we have the two kinds of circuits. We have the traditional circuit, which is a permanent or semi-permanent track designed specifically for racing, and there's no regular traffic from regular cars on it. Then we go to the street circuit, which is a non-permanent track, so it'll adapt the city or the country's existing road system to accommodate a race. This effectively cuts off a part or all of a circuit's normal traffic from happening. And a good example of this is last year in Las Vegas, they shut down the entire strip for the race so that nobody could come to or from once the race had started. And then going back to sectors, there's a thing throughout the sectors called a DRS detection zone or a DRS zone, and DRS stands for drag reduction system. It was originally designed to boost the opportunity for the cars to overtake each other on the track. It's only available in certain areas on each track under certain conditions. The driver has to be within a second of another driver to turn it on, and it is not something they can do without that qualification. And now we're going to move into the tracks themselves. So the first Grand Prix of the year is in Bahrain, which is a kingdom in Western Asia. It was the first Grand Prix to be run in Western Asia, which to most Americans is known as the Middle East. It was first run in 2004. It is a traditional circuit, and this year it also hosted the preseason testing. It's also a night race to deal with the threat of heat so that the drivers don't get overheated. At local time, it is 6 p.m. for the race in the United States, Eastern time at 10 a.m. and 7 a.m. on the West Coast. And it's going to be run on Saturday, March 2nd in observance of Ramadan. Then a week later, also on a Saturday, March 9th, we'll be going to Saudi Arabia for their Grand Prix, which is held in Jeddah. The Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was first run in 2021. It is a street circuit. It'll also be held at night due to the heat threat, so their local time will be 8 p.m. in the United States. It'll be at 12 noon on the East Coast and 9 a.m. on the West Coast. And then a few weeks later, we're going to be switching continents and moving to Australia on March 24th, which will be Sunday. The Australian Grand Prix is held in Melbourne. It is a street circuit around Albert Lake Park. Australia has been hosting a Grand Prix since 1985 with a 2-year break during COVID. It used to be held in Adelaide, Australia, and then it moved to Melbourne in 1996. It'll also be the home Grand Prix for VCARB driver Daniel Ricciardo and for McLaren driver Oscar Piastri. It'll be held at 4 p.m. local time, midnight Eastern time for the United States, and then 9 p.m. Western time. Then we move back to Asia, where we go to Japan at Suzuka for the Japanese Grand Prix. Japanese Grand Prix is a traditional racetrack, and it'll be home Grand Prix for driver Yuki Tsunoda. The Japanese Grand Prix was first run in 1976, and from the get-go, it has been an important race in Formula One. In 1976, the Japanese Grand Prix was the title decider between drivers James Hunt and Niki Lauda. It was held during monsoon conditions, and Lauda had been injured earlier in that season, so after 2 laps, he retired for safety reasons. And then the following year, 1977, it came back to Japan, but there was a death of 2 observers after Gilles Villeneuve had a collision with Ronnie Peterson that made him airborne. The Japanese Grand Prix returned to the calendar in 1987 at Suzuka Circuit, which is a permanent track used by Honda to test. It briefly returned to Fuji, but then it returned and stayed at Suzuka for financial reasons. It is, because of its figure-8 shape, like you can see here, a really popular track for drivers, but it still has remained dangerous even after moving from Fuji to Suzuka due to weather, but just due to general safety. It is the home of the most recent fatal accident in Formula One. In 2014, during a typhoon, driver Jules Bianchi ran into a crane that was on the track to remove another car and became unresponsive. He was taken to the hospital after that and put into a medically induced coma, and then he passed 9 months later. 7 current drivers on the grid were racing that day, and Bianchi was the godfather of Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc. It will be held at 1 p.m. local time, 1 a.m. Eastern time, and 11 p.m. Western time. Following that, our next race, which is on April 21st, is in Shanghai, China. This track is a traditional track, and it'll be the first sprint race of 2024. It was first introduced in 2004, and it was taken off the calendar in 2019. 2024 will be the first time this Grand Prix has been run since 2019. 2019's winner was Lewis Hamilton, but both Daniel and Fernando have won here as well. This will be the home Grand Prix for Sauber driver Guan Yu Zhou. On April 21st, it'll be held at 4 p.m. local time, which is 8 a.m. Eastern time and midnight West Coast time. On May 5th, we'll be moving to North America for the Miami Grand Prix. It was first run in 2022. It is a street circuit. It is not considered the U.S. Grand Prix. That's COTA, or Circuit of the Americas, in Texas. It is a race that has only ever been won by driver Max Verstappen. It'll be held at 4 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. Western time. It will also be the second sprint race of 2024. Now we are moving on to Imola, which is in Emilia-Romagna in Italy, and back to Europe. It is a traditional track, and it is called 2 different things because Emilia-Romagna is the name of the district that it's in, and Imola is the name of the town it's in. It started in 2020 as a one-off race to replace races eliminated by COVID. It was kept on to replace the 2021 Chinese Grand Prix due to restrictions. Last year in 2023, it was canceled due to Storm Minerva. It is on the calendar until 2025, and it will be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time, 6 a.m. Western time, at Autodromo Enzo e Dino Ferrari. And then after that, on May 26th, we move to the Monaco Grand Prix. Monaco is a classic F1 track. It's a street track, and it effectively shuts down the whole entire Principality of Monaco by hosting the race. It was first run in 1950, and it's been on the calendar ever since 1955, barring 2020 due to COVID. Because it takes up the whole country, they really couldn't run it and be safe. To many, it's considered the most prestigious race held in Formula One because it's also held at the same time as the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 500 are in the United States. It'll be the home race of Ferrari driver Charles Leclerc, who notoriously has bad luck during this race. It will be held at 3 p.m. local time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and 6 a.m. Western time. Then on June 9th, we move back to North America, where we go to Montreal, Canada for the Canadian Grand Prix. It is a temporary street circuit, and it has been run on and off since 1967. It was renamed the Circuit de Villeneuve after the driver Gilles Villeneuve, who passed away, and his son Jacques Villeneuve was the world champion in 1997 with Williams. It'll be held at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Western Time. It is also the home race for Aston Martin driver Lance Stroll. Then back to Europe on June 23rd, we go to Barcelona, Spain for the Spanish Grand Prix. It is a traditional circuit. It was first run in 1951, but it became a staple of Formula One during the 1960s. It is on the calendar until 2026, where it will be replaced by a street circuit in Madrid. This is not a very popular decision. The choice by Formula One to prioritize street circuits over traditional circuits has been a really big point of contention with fans, but we'll see. This race will be the home Grand Prix for Aston Martin driver Fernando Alonso and Ferrari driver Carlos Sainz Jr. It will be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time and 6 a.m. Western time. After that, on June 30th, we move to Spielberg, Austria at the Red Bull Ring for the Austrian Grand Prix. It was first run in 1970, and then during COVID, it held 2 Grand Prix to make up for the loss. The other one is called the Strian Grand Prix. It will be held at 3 p.m. local time, 9 a.m. Eastern time, and 6 a.m. Western time. Shifting over to the United Kingdom, we move to the British Grand Prix at Silverstone on July 7th. It is one of two traditional tracks that has been run every year without fail since 1950. The other one is the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, which comes later in the season. It is the home Grand Prix for McLaren's Lando Norris and both Mercedes drivers, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. It is run at 3 p.m. local time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time and 7 a.m. Western time. Then we move back to continental Europe, where we go to Hungary for the Hungarian Grand Prix. It'll be held on July 21st, and it is a traditional track that started hosting in 1986 and hasn't missed a year since. It ran through COVID as well. It is at 3 p.m. local time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time and 6 a.m. Western time. Following Hungary on July 28th, which is the last race before our summer break, is Spa, which is the Belgian Grand Prix. It is a very traditional track, and it is also incredibly dangerous. It's been run on and off since 1950. It is a legendary track for drivers, but because it's so immensely dangerous, it has been reworked several times. The most recent death at Spa was in 2023 with Delano Van Hoft in Formula 2. It's not only the shape of the track that causes so many problems, but it's also the weather, which is notoriously rainy and unpredictable. It'll be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time and 7 a.m. Western time. Returning from summer break on August 25th, we go into Zandvoort, which is the Dutch Grand Prix in the Netherlands. It is a traditional track, and it's been held on and off since 1952. It returned permanently in 2009, but 2020 was canceled due to COVID. This is the home race of world champion Max Verstappen. One of the things Formula One does when they have a driver that's either from a different nationality or somebody who's very dominant is they'll look in a way to put a track where they're from to gain a lot of fans. Max's fans really go over the top at Zandvoort. It'll be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time and 6 a.m. Western time. Then we return to Italy on September 1st at Monza. Monza is a very traditional track. It's considered to be the Italian Grand Prix, and it is one of two tracks that has been run every year since 1950. It is the home race for Ferrari, and it is just an absolute sea of red. There are tifosi everywhere. It's crazy. 7 of the 20 drivers currently running have won at Monza, and 12 of those 20 have separately podiumed there. It'll be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 9 a.m. Eastern time and 6 a.m. Western time. A little further east, on September 15th, we'll go to Baku for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. It is a street circuit that was first held in 2016. It was skipped in 2020 due to COVID. It'll be held at 4 p.m. local time, which is 7 a.m. Eastern time and 4 a.m. Western time. Back to Eastern Asia, we move on September 22nd to Marina Bay in Singapore for the Singaporean Grand Prix. It is a street circuit, and that's considered the premier night race just because of how beautiful it is. Singapore isn't a very big country, and so you can see most of Singapore from the Grand Prix, and a lot of the hotels bookend strip so you can stay in different places and watch it. It'll be held at night due to heat, and it is considered probably the most difficult heat-wise that's been long-term. It'll be at 9 p.m. local time, 8 a.m. Eastern time, 5 a.m. Western time. And a fun fact about Singapore, it is one of the very few races that Max Verstappen has never won. After about a month break, we go back to North America, and on October 20th, we run the U.S. Grand Prix at Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. It is also a sprint race. It has been held on and off since 1959, but it was skipped in 2020 due to COVID. It's a traditional circuit, and it'll be held at 3 p.m. local time, which is 4 p.m. on the East Coast and then 1 p.m. on the West Coast. Sliding a little further down the Americas, on October 27th, we move to the Mexican Grand Prix in Mexico City. It is also a traditional track, and it has been held on and off since 1962. It became a mainstay in 2015, but it was canceled in 2020 due to COVID. It'll be the home race of Red Bull driver Sergio Perez, and this is considered his teammate Max Verstappen's specialty race. He wins this race almost every time he's run it. It'll be run at 3 p.m. local time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, and 1 p.m. Western time. Then we have our one singular South American Grand Prix on November 3rd in Sao Paulo, Brazil, we have Interlagos. It is a traditional circuit with a sprint race that has been run every year since 1972, besides 2020. A lot of winners have won their titles here. So, like Fernando Alonso won his title here, Jenson Button won his title here, and Lewis Hamilton has won one of his titles here as well. It will be held at 2 p.m. local time, which is 12 noon Eastern time and 9 a.m. Western time. After this, we go back to North America and back to the United States for the Las Vegas Grand Prix on November 23rd. It is a street circuit, and it's run up and down the famed Las Vegas Strip. However, last year, which was its inaugural year, it was plagued with difficulties. Las Vegas had to repave the streets, and that caused a lot of issues with traffic and is still causing issues with traffic. There were some extreme measures taken by the people running the race to hide the view of the track from random streets, and it didn't work super well. It also had a manhole cover pop, which took out driver Carlos Sainz's car, and because they don't have force majeure rules in Formula One, he was handed a grid penalty because he had to fix something on his car that wasn't his fault. It's also a really weird race because it's supposed to be a race to get Americans interested, but it's held at 10 p.m. local time in Las Vegas, which is 1 a.m. on the East Coast. So I would be interested to see if they'll consider shifting the time for that this year, like later in the year, to accommodate more viewers. But it does mean that the European market has a little bit more time to watch it because it's not in the middle of the night. After this, we head back to the Middle East, and on December 1st, we'll be racing in Losail in Qatar. It'll be the third time this race has been run, once in 2021 and then 2023. In 2022, it was canceled due to Qatar hosting the World Cup. Last year, this race was absolutely the worst. It was held 2 months earlier, and the heat exposure for the drivers was crazy, even though it was held at night. One driver during the race retired due to illness. Several needed aid to get out of their cars once the race was finished, and at least 3 drivers fainted either while driving and were able to regain consciousness or at the medical center after the race had been run. There's a lot of issues with Qatar in general with human rights violations, but honestly, the drivers getting to the point where they were at the end of the Grand Prix last year was quite scary. I'm hoping the delay pushing it to December will alleviate some of that stress. It'll be run at 8 p.m. local time, which is 12 noon in the United States on the East Coast and 9 a.m. on the West Coast. And last but definitely not least, on December 8th, we moved to the Yas Marina Circuit in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. It was first run in 2009 on a traditional circuit, and then it became the permanent season closer in 2014. Last year's postseason testing was held here as well. It is a day to night race, so a lot of fireworks are set off at the end, and it's really pretty. It'll be run at 5 p.m. local time, which is 8 a.m. Eastern time and 5 p.m. Western time. This was where the 2021 controversial title was decided. So if we get a good season this year, Abu Dhabi is definitely a race to wake up and see. So we've gone through the 24 tracks for 2024. I hope you have a better idea of where we're going, what we're seeing, and also how absolutely crazy this calendar is. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Your Mileage May Vary, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!